Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
This is the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for coming along on the journey of this show that is designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit our website at digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show every single week with Craig Brown. Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. The weather is perfect, which happens every now and then in the Midwest, and beginning to see more and more people. We've been visiting some sites around the Midwest, and we're in the middle of a trip. That explains the picture behind me. The people that get to see the video, they can figure out where I am, but otherwise, we're not going to talk about it.
Looks to me like you're in a hotel.
I learned something today, and our guest is from the other city. I learned that Second City, which means I'm in Chicago. Why is it called Second City? And a lot of people on the East Coast think it's because it's the second city. Not
New York would be the first city, right?
Well, whatever. Boston probably is the first city, but let's not get into this discussion, right? But no, it's the second city because it burnt down and they had to rebuild it. And so that's why it's called Second City. Interesting trivia for the day.
That's what I like about you, Craig. You teach us a lot of things, even things beyond the world of PLM.
Good.
So every single week, Craig and I try to bring to this podcast interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help the listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today, our guest is Howard Tiersky. Hey, Howard, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So for those of you who don't know Howard, he helps big brands update their customer experience to be relevant to today's hyper digital customers. He is also the author of 2 books, including Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance. And I got to tell you, we all want an antidote to irrelevance for sure. So Howard, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Well, I have been in the field of working with big brands on implementing digital and using digital to improve their business for over 25 years. I started doing that working with Ernst & Young Consulting and then Capgemini, where I started their first user experience practice. And for the last 14 and a half years, I've been running my own company, which is called From, the Digital Transformation Agency, where we work with companies like Avis and JP Morgan Chase, Transamerica, NBC, and many others on their digital strategy and implementing that across a wide range of different digital touchpoints.
Well, interesting, Howard. Well, welcome to the show. The title of your book caught my eye, and then I got to thinking about all the customers we serve in the car business. And I wanted to ask you first and foremost, what or who is a digital customer? I'm trying to do a segment analysis here. Is it everybody or is it somebody else? So who's a digital customer?
Sure. Well, it's not everybody because it's not Fran Lebowitz, if you know who she is. There was a recent Martin Scorsese documentary about Fran Lebowitz, who's, of course, a beloved, longstanding humorist, writer. And she doesn't use a phone. She doesn't use a computer. She types her columns for The New Yorker, or wherever she's writing these days, on an electric typewriter. So she is not a digital customer, but she's so interesting for the fact that she's not a digital customer and also that she's very funny that they made a whole mini-series about her. So, I think the reality is, to me, when I say digital customer, I'm talking about people who are living a digitally centric lifestyle. The vast majority, there are more smartphones in the world today than there are people. The typical consumer is checking their smartphone 150 to 300 times a day. They're sleeping with that phone by the side of their bed. And it has woven its way into how they do just about everything, from shopping to dating to their finances to the way they do the work. That is the digital customer. And I'll mention one other thing. You mentioned cars, and I've worked in the automotive industry too. There's a study Accenture does, I think every year, but a couple of years ago when they were asking vehicle purchasers about the different priorities in purchasing a new vehicle, the importance of the digital components of the car, the entertainment system and other things like that, the dash, the digital components, exceeded the importance of the vehicle performance and handling in the average customer that was being surveyed. So that gives you a sense when your car, when customers think the digital capabilities of your car are more important than how it drives in their vehicle purchase decision, that's a pretty digitally centric customer.
Yeah, wow, that goes so against the performance view, right? Which, in the truck business, it's all about the next horsepower limit. And in the sports car business, it's about the next speed or handling, right? And now you're telling me, no, it's about whether I'm connected to Spotify or Napster or whatever, right? So
yeah,
interesting.
Well,
okay.
I tell you, my wife who loves Subarus, and she's on her like third or fourth Subaru, her current one is maybe 3 years old, and she told me she wants to get the new one. And why? It's not because of the odometer. It's not because there's a problem with the car. It's that hers doesn't support CarPlay, and the new ones do. And that's the reason she's ready to get a new Subaru. So there's a real life example right there.
Interesting. Okay, so that helps with the digital customer, and we, the Digital Enterprise Society, it's kind of a different thing, though it's a similar paradigm shift in that instead of doing products by building a buck and then building a mule and then building a prototype and testing all of them physically, which takes a lot of time, we want to go faster. In order to go faster, we needed to use digital tools, simulation tools, computers, right? And so we did more and more of that. And that's these people that talk product lifecycle management. It really started out at managing the 3D assets, the models of a car, the models of an interior, managing it better. And it tried to evolve into PLM, right? The trouble with it is it's focused on P, product lifecycle management, right? It continues to be, when I think about the history of the car business, the Henry Ford thought everybody should have a Model T and it should be black. And, General Motors came into dominance because it thought about customers in the sense of having a range of products, right? From entry level to luxury and all the steps in between. And so the Digital Enterprise Society, I think, needs to work on digital customers because we have a lot of techniques of visualization, among other things, that can help people understand a product long before we invest a lot of money in making a plant to make those. So this keeping the customers in the center of things, it's easy to say those words. It gets really difficult when we can't predict what they'll pay for. So your wife willing to buy the next Subaru because of this rather simple, frankly, technology of Apple Play in the car, right? So it's really interesting, right? That value proposition is much different than, no kidding, what do I have to do to get 2% more horsepower, which, by the way, is a bunch of engineering challenges, right? So I'm just curious, what are your ideas around how do you keep the value the customer wants front and center? I mean, I can imagine powertrain guys working on a new engine, and I can imagine the entertainment guys coming in and saying, no, I want your budget to just make sure Apple Play gets in the car. And by the way, I cost like 1/1000th of what you cost. This is like a no-brainer, right? Somebody should ask, what's the value proposition? And is that clear to products companies? What is the value proposition? I mean, how do you make revenue on this stuff?
Absolutely. Well, I think that's critical. So first of all, obviously different products target different types of customers. There are some vehicles that are targeting a performance buyer. And my guess is that, if you ask the buyer of a Ferrari, the performance handling would be much more important than the digital components. This was a study, the Accenture study I mentioned, I think was asking sort of a broad swath of vehicle purchases. So the first thing is, but the core is to understand the customer that you're targeting. And how do you understand the customer? How do you get the answer to the question, which will drive more incremental willingness to pay, which will drive more preference over a competitive product? Customer research. And there's a wide range of strategies for customer research. It's one of the reasons why about a fourth of my book is dedicated just to talking about a wide range of different strategies for customer research, because I think it's an area that many companies underinvest in. And some companies invest in very specific types of customer research, like let's say focus groups, and they make important decisions based on a limited set of research tools. And sometimes, as in the famous case of New Coke, for example, those things can lead you astray. But if you have the right combination of customer research tools and techniques, then you can massively improve your aim in terms of the investments you make, having the desired behavioral result in your customers.
So this is really then a form of requirements engineering. And sometimes people get frustrated when I use those two words together. I really do mean the refinement of requirements, the engineering of requirements to better understand the value proposition that you can get with customers. And to be clear with everybody on the call here, the customers are people willing to pay, right? Not people that have opinions about color, though if they're willing to pay for the new color, you want to know that, right? And so is the thing that digital technologies bring is the ability to show off what it could be, whether it's connectedness or performance even. This whole idea around ease of use, I think one of the things the Apple world has done for us is make it clear ease of use is possible with all these embedded computers. Well, if ease of use is possible, then how do we do a better job of requirements engineering? And is it as simple as having this discussion, or are there other techniques people should use?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, I'm always interested in language and the possible unintended consequence of language and how we think and approach our work. So I want to just highlight that word requirements. And of course, I know what you mean by requirements, and that's a term that we all use and throw around. And I think we all kind of have a common sense of what that means. But I think it could also be a little bit of a dangerous term, because what does it mean, a requirement? Something that must be there, a requirement. If you go to college, the requirements are the things you must do. They're not the optional things. They're not the elective things, But in many times, the things that make us love a product are not the things that are absolutely required. They're the extra things, or the things that create delight, et cetera. So, and I realize that's not how you're using it, but I think that term can lead us astray. And I would add also that requirements can also, let me put it this way. What drives behavior is not requirements, but experience. Now, requirements absolutely make sense as a tool to get to experience. You have to somehow spec something out so someone can build it, absolutely. But there are also the possibility of creating a solution, whether that's a vehicle or an app or a store environment, that meets stated requirements and yet does not yield the experience that drives the customer behavior. So while I'm all for having requirements, we also have to be a little bit careful that we realize that what we're really engineering, requirements are a tool. And just like we're not engineering, what we're really engineering is an experience.
All right, that I'm with you. I like this a lot. So the other thing I heard recently at a systems engineering conference of all things is the keynote was from the nuclear Navy, right? So he's worried about really critical systems. And he made the comment that a requirement is an agreement between the producer and the payer. And I listened to this, I'm like, that's exactly right. So a lot of things we call requirements are not that at all. To your point, they're really about experiences. And we just choose to call the things we write down requirements, even though a lot of those are probably desires or wishes. And if you were to encapsulate those all together, they become what you talk about in your book. They're experiences. It's experiences of what we pay for, actually.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. If you miss the horsepower by 2%, I might still buy it because it's got a great color, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And and you mentioned earlier the idea of visualization and prototyping. That's super powerful, and I think in many cases underutilized. We have, of course, two different domains, right? There's digital products, right, like an app or a virtual reality experience, and then you have real physical products like a car, for example. Certainly, prototyping and creating different degrees of fidelity of versions of a software solution makes just so much sense that it's insane that it's not done every single time everywhere, because sometimes people come up with an idea and they love it so much they just want to build it and launch, and they think we don't have time to do prototypes and show it to users. We're just going to get this product to the marketplace. And 99 times out of 100, unless you're just really good at throwing darts with a blindfold on, and by the way, is it possible to hit a bullseye when you put a blindfold on and throw a dart? Sure. It is. It's just not very likely. Right. So similarly, we can create an app and have it be successful without doing any real feedback iteration with customer research. But why? Versus creating simulations in tools like Envision or iRise or XD. There's a number of tools out there that are good at that. And then conducting structured feedback sessions with users. And that's, by the way, that's one thing I talk also about in my book, is how do you do that so that you really get good results and don't turn the subject of the research into a designer, which they're probably not qualified to be. If they start telling you, well, I think you should move this button over here, and I think you should make this blue and not green, now you're just taking their opinion instead of somebody else's. So there are certain ways to make sure that you're really getting what's really valuable from a user in a research session, which is really understanding what is their experience because that's what your engineering is, an experience. So if you create a product that is designed to yield an experience when someone interacts with it, you want to make sure that your research is focused on observing people interacting with your prototype product and seeing, well, what kind of experience do they have? What kind of emotional reaction do they have? What kind of difficulties or problems or confusion or frustration or whatnot might they have when trying to accomplish whatever the goal that is supposed to be achieved when using the product?
Yeah, and of course, applications like what's on your iPhone, or your iPhone is now a utilitarian device like your car. And what really is the value is the apps that you download, right? So prototyping an app is largely a human constrained event, right? Whereas prototyping a car, especially if you want people to go for a drive, that's expensive. You got to build it, right? You got to build 100 of them or whatever to go do your market survey. And so it gets a little more difficult because you can ask people abstract questions like, well, would it be nice if it was 10% faster? Most everybody will say, sure. Until gas prices, never mind.
That type of research is fairly unreliable.
Yeah, right. So I think the use of digital tools, especially visualization, I was always amazed at what we had accomplished in the car business on visualizing the scene that a car was in, whether it was a snowfield, a sunset, a sunrise, or a bright sunny day. And you could look at the angles of reflections off of fenders. And by the time I retired, this was all photorealistic. We don't do physical mock-ups anymore for those views. We do it all with computers. And if you can do it for engineering with computers and the creative studio, well, then you absolutely could show that to a customer, right? And say, well, do you like this or do you like that? And, I think, I'm sure more of that is happening, but it just shows that everybody doing digital stuff, digital product development, digital market research, if you will, I think all of this would engage the digital customer a lot better. And so I think the word digital, I'm afraid, is becoming so used that it's confusing. Do you come across this in your consulting practices? Is it clear what everybody means when they say digital?
No.
Okay. Can you help?
Well, it's like that old joke where, one fish says to the other fish, ooh, the water's a little cold today. And the other fish says, water, what's water?
Yeah.
It's like, it's like we're all swimming in it. And so at a certain point, look, there's so many terms and words we use, right? Whether it's total quality or Six Sigma or digital or innovation or strategy or brand there's so many words and labels we use in business, and they're just tools. It's just a tool to represent a larger idea. And the important thing is when a word is a useful tool is when I say something and you understand what I mean, right? If I say table and you're picturing the same thing. If there's terms that are so abstract that we mean different things, then we just need to get beyond the term. There's no one definition. No one can say digital definitely means this and it doesn't mean that. But I do think that the reality is that we have digital touch points, obviously, websites and mobile apps and chatbots and home appliances and embedded systems and all kinds of screens in cars and things like that customers interact with. And we need to be thinking in every business about how to create great digital touch points. But equally, we have non-digital touch points like a salesperson in a car showroom. And we need to be thinking about how do we enable those interactions for customers as well? How do we engineer those experiences when the salesperson walks up to the customer, and digital has a substantial role to play there as well. If that customer has been in the showroom before and we can identify them and we can know their preferences or, et cetera, et cetera. We scan their driver's license for a test drive and it gives us information about different things that might help us more effectively interact with them. So digital really winds up weaving into so many aspects of business that, you can't anymore have a digital department. And even having something like a chief digital officer, most companies have found is not super useful because you can't really think of it as this separate thing. It's like being the Secretary General of the United Nations. It sounds important, but actually he can't really do all that much because he doesn't actually run a country. So really I think that what you really need is digital leaders running all business units. And when I'm a digital leaders, what do I mean? I mean, people who are thinking about digital as the core of the future of their business, not the only aspect of business. If you're Taco Bell, obviously you're not going to move towards selling digital tacos instead of real tacos, but you're going to think about, as they are doing, redesigning your restaurant so that you have multiple drive-through lanes, so that the people who order on their phone and are told their taco is ready to pick up don't wait in line behind the person who's at the microphone asking the difference between an enchilada and a chimichanga or what have you.
Right. Yeah. So then, okay. So digital's computers are embedded, maybe lots of them, it turns out. And the last thing you talked about, it's about changing the way your company runs in terms of its processes, right? Whether it be a delivery process for tacos, or it be some other process. I think, and it's recently here with the pandemic, we've all had these disruptions, right? You can't get the product you want because it's not in the showroom. The sales guy that can come up with his tablet and say, oh yeah, but there's one 72 miles away and I can have it here in 2 hours. That guy's going to get a sale, right? As opposed to the salesman who says, I don't know when we're going to get another one in, right?
Yeah.
And at the center of all that are connected databases, not only of the different car dealerships, but also of maybe even manufacturing if they're trying to adjust just what they build based upon demand. So it's interesting. So do you come across the term digitalization? When I've heard this used by some of the people I work with to mean the overall re-engineering of all processes, business processes, product development processes, and so on, as opposed to digital, just use some computers to replace paper, right? And that's been, maybe that's the most narrow definition of digital, is just get away from paper, right? But have you heard the term digitalization? Does that make sense with you?
Yeah, I've certainly heard the term digitalization, digital transformation. You could probably Google different definitions of these terms. And I don't know that they're used consistently. I think what I typically hear is that digitalization is a more straightforward, like, for example, if I were to take a manual for a car and make it available somehow in an app or something, then you could argue that is digitalization, right? We've taken something analog or physical and made it into a digital format. Whereas if I have an app that's continuously aware of all the car's features and capabilities and suggesting things to me and completely changing my experience of the vehicle, rather than just giving me essentially a digital format of the same old book, then this is more an example of digital transformation. That's the way I typically hear these terms used, but I also hear people using digitalization the way other people would use digital transformation. And I go back to the point I made earlier. Here's what's most important. It's the customer has changed. Their expectations have changed. And we as businesses had better change to catch up with the customer, or we're going to be in trouble. And however we label it is all good with me, as long as the experience that meets the needs of today's customer.
So this is good. So the trouble with PLM world and now the Digital Enterprise Society is we talk about products. And I'm curious, I got two questions that are related, but let's go with the first one. Do you hear the term PLM anymore? Product Lifecycle Management?
Sure.
Is it the center of decisions?
No.
Good. So maybe we need something else. Maybe we need this focus on customers. Right. I don't know what we call it. I can goof around with acronyms like anybody can. I can call it customer lifecycle management, but then it sounds like the life cycle of the customer. And I really didn't mean that. I still meant the product, right?
Well, I'll tell you what I call it, and what we do in our business is customer journey mapping.
Oh, okay.
And so, and of course I didn't make that up, but that's so, in a customer journey map, and this is also something I talk about in depth in my book, we say, well, what's the overall experience you want that customer to have? So let's stick with buying a vehicle, right? So we want to start by saying, well, what's the trigger? What causes someone to even be in the market to buy a car? I mean, there are a variety of different reasons, right? My lease is up, my kids just got a driver's license, I hit midlife crisis and I want a Corvette, a variety of reasons, right? So my car broke down. So, okay, so there's a trigger. And then what's the process people typically go through? Well, there's some steps. There's a natural flow that people go through to decide what kind of car, like, do I want a convertible? Do I want an SUV? Do I want a pickup truck? And then start to narrow it down. And then, eventually they're going to be taking test drives. They're going to narrow it down. They're going to pick packages. They're going to address financing. They're going to take delivery of a vehicle. Then they're going to go through some ownership stages, early ownership, later ownership. Eventually, they're going to want to trade it in. So you've got, at some point, they're going to need repairs. So you've got this journey that people are on. Now, that's not about a product. That's about what's the overall experience.
It's the journey life cycle. Yeah.
Yes. And when we talk about engineering, as I talk about engineering and experience, I like to start at that level, because whatever products you're creating, the odds are that customer is going to interface with a number of products. And products, another term that different people may define in different ways. But to me, that app that they use to search for a car is a product, even if they don't pay for it, as much as the car that they're going to buy is a product. And, a virtual reality showroom that they can go into, that's another kind of a product, right? And whether we agree that it's a product or not a product isn't even the important thing. The important thing is to say that there's this series of experiences interacting with a variety of, let's just call them things, right? Whether it's a car or an app or a website or whatever. And what we need to think about in engineering that effectively is, how do we want people to experience that whole journey? How do we want them to move from step to step? And if we think about an individual product in that context, all of a sudden, it's part of a whole. It's not just one single standalone thing. And it needs to be driven, the whole process needs to be driven by our understanding of the customer. Who's the customer we're targeting? How do they like to buy? How do they want to test drive their car? How do they want to take delivery of their car? Are they configuring and customizing a vehicle, or do they just want to buy off the floor? And of course, you may have multiple journeys, because you may say, well, we have several different types of customers, and they go through different types of journeys.
And some are clearly super digital, meaning they're you said it earlier, they're connected all the time. They wouldn't dream of their life journey not having their connected device, right? Or devices if they're in multiple places. So this is
absolutely. And by the way, if Fran Lebowitz shows up at your dealership with no phone and no computer and says, I love this car, but can you get it in, green? And that dealer can, in 2 seconds, check an app or whatnot and say, well, it's available in Connecticut. I can have it tomorrow. Then she's going to be happy, whether she has any awareness or not, that there's a digital tool that was used to give her that answer. We've just met that customer's need.
So that takes me back a little bit to what I was thinking as we prepared for this about, satisfying customers is in some sense all about getting rid of the waste. And at least from a customer's point of view, waste is wait time, waiting for something, right? Waiting to find inventory, waiting for delivery. A few years ago, that was all about this, build to order. You tell me exactly what you want, and then we'll go handcraft it, and you'll get it 3 months later if you're lucky, right?
If you're lucky, right?
And the digital customer would find that completely unacceptable. They're expecting not. A lot of people might say instant gratification. I don't mean that. They're expecting service quickly, because today I can get stuff from Amazon within a day or maybe 2 days, but quickly, right? And especially with fuel prices the way they are and everything else going on with the pandemic, we are learning quickly how to become digital. So people that might have sworn they weren't going to be digital have learned out that they have to be in order to stay safe and healthy. So I wonder, have you made any notice about the speed with which people are embracing digital based upon our challenges of these last 3 years? Has it gone faster? Is it segmenting the markets more? And what's happening?
Of course. I mean, many people, CEO of Microsoft and many others have made these observations that, COVID has accelerated. In a year, we went through 5 years of digital transformation or 10 years of digital transformation. I'm not really sure how you measure this. So there's the argument of, is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? But the key point, yes, digital transformation has accelerated. Why? Because the customer's adoption has accelerated. We cut off access to certain non-digital. People didn't want to go to the bank. They didn't want to go to the store. They didn't want to go to the movies. So what do? They turned to digital. Thank God it was that, they didn't want to go to the office or weren't allowed to go to the office. So we went to Zoom, we went to Netflix, we went to online banking, we went to Instacart, et cetera, et cetera. And what many consumers found is that actually, these were pretty good. They liked these experiences.
Yeah, right.
And so while there is some retrenching, I have been to the movies a few times since COVID ended, but probably less frequently than I was going before COVID. And so what we're seeing is that a large percentage, maybe not 100%, but a large percentage of the behavioral acceleration of adoption of digital that was forced by COVID, stayed and is continuing to stay even as those COVID restrictions are lifting. And so, yes, that has caused an acceleration of the customer. And based on everything I've been saying, I mean, to me, that is the pace car of digital transformation. The customer is the pace car. If the customer is going faster, then, as a business, you better be going faster, or you're going to wind up being like, Toys R Us or Sears or any one of a number of brands that just didn't move fast enough.
So Howard, it's been a wonderful discussion. I want to keep our listeners in mind that the Digital Enterprise Society is largely conventional, I'll call it, product development people who started using computers because it was less costly, it was faster to market than using the old tried and true ways of building a car. Now we have much broader definition of products that you pointed out. And furthermore, customers are becoming more digital, if for any other reason than because of the pandemic, right? So it's time for us in engineering to think about experiences. And I really like the way you point that out. I encourage people to read your book. I went through all my design thinking classes, which, by the way, his book does an excellent job summarizing and giving you other clues. And so thanks for joining us. And back to you, Tom.
Well, thank you. This was fun. So Howard, if people want to get in touch with you, maybe they want to find out more about what you do, they want to buy your book, how do they find you?
Sure. So my book can be found wherever fine books are sold, but Amazon, Barnes & Noble, et cetera. But there's also a website for the book, which is winningdigitalcustomers.com. You can go there. You can actually download the first chapter for free. You can purchase the book there if you like as well. Also, if people are interested in learning more about my consulting practice, the website is from.digital. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn. People are welcome to follow me there. And I publish a lot of thought leadership there under my name.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for joining us. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. We want you to come back every single week for more thoughts, ideas, and actionable information around your career in product lifecycle management. Hey, the Digital Enterprise Society, it is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Don't forget to go check out the website at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.